There is a question most people never think to ask. What if you are far less separate than you believe? What if the rhythm of your thoughts, the tides of your emotions, the direction of your life, and even the deepest possibilities hidden within you are connected to forces far greater than anything visible to the eye? For centuries, humanity has looked at the stars and wondered whether the universe is merely a backdrop to life, or an active participant in it. Modern life teaches us to think of ourselves as isolated individuals, moving through an indifferent world. Yet beneath the surface, a different story may be unfolding. A story of invisible connections. A story of subtle influences. A story in which every life is woven into a vast cosmic tapestry stretching across time, space, and consciousness itself. This book is not about predicting the future. It is not about superstition. And it is not about the fortune-telling version of astrology that most people have come to know. Instead, it is an exploration of something far deeper, the hidden relationship between human consciousness and the living universe. Along the way, we will explore remarkable discoveries, ancient insights, scientific mysteries, forgotten wisdom, and profound questions about destiny, freedom, purpose, and the nature of existence itself. You will discover why certain moments shape entire lifetimes, why life appears to move in patterns larger than individual choice, and why some of the oldest ideas in human history may contain truths we are only beginning to understand. Most importantly, you will be invited to see yourself in a completely new way. Not as a separate fragment struggling alone against life, but as a living expression of something infinitely larger. Because the deeper we travel into this mystery, the more a surprising possibility begins to emerge. The universe may not be happening around you. It may be happening through you. And that is where our journey begins. Chapter 1. The Conversation Written in Light. Most people spend their entire lives believing they are separate. Separate from nature. Separate from one another. Separate from the stars above them. And perhaps most dangerously of all, separate from the invisible forces shaping their thoughts, emotions, and destinies. At first glance, that belief appears reasonable. After all, when you look at yourself in a mirror, you see a distinct individual. A unique face. A separate life. A personal story unfolding behind your eyes. The tree outside your window seems unrelated to you. The ocean belongs somewhere else. The moon drifts silently through the night sky. And the sun, that brilliant sphere hanging 93 million miles away, appears so distant that it might as well belong to another reality altogether. Yet appearances have deceived humanity before. Many times. And what if one of the greatest misunderstandings in human history is hidden inside this illusion of separation? What if the distance is not as real as it seems? What if something is happening beneath the surface of existence, something so subtle, so constant, that most people never notice it at all? Because the truth begins in a place far older than any civilization. Far older than language. Far older than memory itself. It begins with fire. Imagine standing at the edge of an ancient cosmic shoreline. There is no earth yet. No forests. No rivers. No cities glowing at night. No human beings wondering about meaning, success, happiness, or purpose. Only a vast ocean of darkness punctuated by a single radiant presence. The sun. Modern science tells us that the planets emerged from the same celestial material that gave birth to the sun itself. Earth was not dropped into existence from somewhere else. It emerged from the same cosmic source. And much later, from Earth's soil, oceans, minerals, and atmosphere, life began its long journey. Plants appeared. Creatures followed. Eventually, human beings arrived. The chain is astonishingly simple. The earth emerged from the sun. Life emerged from earth. You emerged from life. Which means something profound follows. The story of the sun is, in some hidden way, your story too. Not metaphorically. Literally. The calcium inside your bones. The iron traveling through your blood. The carbon woven into every cell of your body. All of it carries an ancient history. You are not merely standing beneath the cosmos. You are made from it. And that realization changes more than most people realize. Because if two things share the same origin, can they ever be entirely separate? That question may seem philosophical, but it leads toward a mystery that has fascinated scientists for decades. And the answer is stranger than it first appears. Consider two violins placed in the same room. If a musician plucks a string on one instrument, sometimes a matching string on the other begins to vibrate ever so slightly. No hand touched it. No visible force moved it. Yet something passed between them. An invisible resonance. A hidden conversation. Scientists often use different language, but the principle remains the same. Systems that share deep similarity can influence one another in remarkable ways. One echoes. The other responds. And what if life itself operates according to a similar principle? What if existence is filled with hidden resonances we rarely notice? This possibility first became difficult to ignore through a series of unusual experiments. Experiments involving twins. Not ordinary siblings, but identical twins. Two individuals emerging from the same biological blueprint. Two expressions of the same original design. Researchers separated identical twins into different environments. Different rooms. Different conditions. Then they presented simultaneous stimuli. Questions. Images. Sounds. Moments requiring immediate reactions. The results repeatedly produced something curious. Again and again, similar responses appeared. Unexpected parallels emerged. Patterns surfaced that seemed too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Not perfect. Not magical. Yet remarkable enough to force scientists into uncomfortable territory. Something appeared to connect them beyond ordinary explanation. Some researchers referred to this phenomenon as a form of deep resonance. A subtle correspondence. An invisible bridge. And while debates continue, the broader implication remains fascinating. Perhaps similarity creates connection. Perhaps shared origins create echoes. Perhaps life communicates in ways that our current instruments can only partially detect. Yet this is where the story becomes truly interesting. Because if resonance exists between two human beings, what about between humanity and the Earth itself? And if Earth emerged from the Sun, could an even larger conversation be unfolding? One hidden in plain sight? For centuries, trees quietly held clues. Patiently. Silently. Waiting for someone to ask the right question. Imagine cutting through the trunk of a centuries-old tree. Inside, you discover concentric circles. Ring after ring. Year after year. A living archive. A biological diary written without words. Most people know that these rings reveal age. Count the rings, and you estimate how long the tree has lived. Simple enough. But age is only the beginning. Each ring also records environmental conditions. Wet years. Dry years. Cold seasons. Abundant seasons. Difficult seasons. The tree remembers them all. Long after human memory has faded. Long after written records have vanished. The tree continues carrying the evidence. A silent witness. And for decades, scientists studied these natural archives. At first, they expected only climatic information. Rainfall. Temperature. Drought cycles. Nothing more. But hidden inside the rings was a pattern nobody expected. A rhythm. A pulse. A recurring signal. Something arriving from beyond the Earth itself. Researchers began noticing that approximately every 11 years, trees across vast regions displayed unusual growth patterns. Their rings expanded. Their biological behavior shifted. The change was too widespread to be random. Too synchronized to ignore. The mystery deepened. Because local weather could not fully explain it. Different forests experience different conditions, different temperatures, different rainfall, different environments. Yet somehow the pattern remained. Again, and again, and again. Eventually investigators discovered something extraordinary. The timing matched cycles occurring on the Sun. Periods when solar activity intensified. Periods when immense storms of energy erupted from the star that sustains life on Earth. And somehow, trees appeared to respond. Not one forest. Not one nation. But across enormous portions of the planet. As though they were listening to a signal humanity could barely perceive. Pause for a moment and consider the implication. A tree rooted in silence was somehow recording events unfolding millions of miles away. Not through superstition. Not through mythology. Through biology. Through measurable reality. And that raises a question difficult to avoid. If trees are sensitive enough to respond to solar rhythms, what about us? The average person rarely thinks about such things. Life feels too busy. Emails, bills, deadlines, notifications, news alerts, schedules, responsibilities. The modern world constantly pulls attention outward. Few people stop long enough to ask whether their inner world might also be responding to larger patterns. But perhaps that assumption deserves reconsideration. Because humans are not less complex than trees. We are more complex. Far more. And complexity does not eliminate sensitivity. It may simply hide it. A tree records its experience visibly. Its history becomes rings. Its memories become wood. Humans operate differently. Our histories are written in emotion, in perception, in habits, in fears, in desires, in dreams. The records exist. But they are stored in subtler places. And that makes them harder to read. Yet not impossible. Not forever. The real mystery is not whether human beings are connected to larger rhythms. The real mystery is how deeply those rhythms shape the lives we think are entirely our own. And that question leads us toward an even more astonishing discovery. Because the 11-year cycle was only the beginning. Scientists eventually uncovered another rhythm. A much larger one. A cycle spanning nearly an entire human lifetime. A cycle hidden within both history and nature. Its discovery began beside one of the world's most legendary rivers. And what researchers found there would challenge assumptions about coincidence, time, and humanity's relationship with the universe itself. But before we can understand that revelation, we must first follow a trail left behind thousands of years ago by a civilization that believed the sky and the earth were engaged in a conversation far older than human memory. And that is where the next piece of the puzzle begins. Chapter 2. The Hidden Rhythm Beneath All Things. There is a strange assumption most people carry without ever questioning it. They believe their life belongs entirely to them. Their successes, their struggles, their moods, their energy, their illnesses, their moments of inspiration, their seasons of exhaustion. All of it appears personal, private, self-contained. Yet what if that assumption is only partially true? What if every human life is less like an isolated island and more like a vessel sailing across an immense ocean whose tides are influenced by forces far beyond the horizon? And what if those tides have been shaping human experience long before anyone learned how to measure them? The clues were hidden for thousands of years. Not in temples. Not in philosophy books. Not in mystical traditions. But in something far simpler. A river. A river that never forgot. Imagine a civilization standing at the edge of a vast waterway. Generation after generation watches its rise and fall. Children become grandparents. Kings become legends. Empires appear and disappear. Yet the river continues its endless journey. Patient. Observant. Recording everything. Ancient rulers understood something modern people often overlook: memory is not confined to human beings. The world remembers. Mountains remember. Ice remembers. Forests remember. And rivers remember. So meticulous records were kept. Year after year. Century after century. How high the waters rose. How far they retreated. When abundance arrived. When scarcity appeared. When the currents surged with power. When it moved with unusual weakness. The records stretched not across decades, but across millennia. A living archive spanning nearly 4,000 years. At the time, nobody knew exactly why such information would matter. The answer belonged to the future. But sometimes the most valuable discoveries begin with a question whose purpose is not yet understood. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because when scientists finally began comparing those ancient records with newly discovered patterns in solar activity, they found something that refused to be ignored. A rhythm. Not random. Not occasional. A recurring pulse moving through nature itself. And the length of that pulse was astonishing. Approximately 90 years. A span almost equal to a human lifetime. Yet few people realize what this truly means. Picture a lighthouse standing beside a dark coastline. Its beam rotates steadily through the night. From a distance, the light appears constant. But anyone standing close enough knows it is moving through phases. Approaching. Peaking. Receding. Returning. The sun, scientists discovered, appears to move through similar long-term cycles. Not merely the shorter bursts of activity discussed in the previous chapter, but much larger waves that unfold across generations. For decades, its energetic influence gradually increases. Then, after reaching a peak, it slowly declines. A vast cosmic inhale. A vast cosmic exhale. A cycle so slow that most human beings witness only a fraction of it. And because it unfolds over lifetimes, its influence can easily hide behind the ordinary events of history. But hidden things are not necessarily insignificant. Sometimes they are the most important things of all. Consider two sailors. The first launches his vessel when the winds are moving in his direction. The second launches when powerful currents push against him. Both are skilled. Both are determined. Both possess courage. Yet their journeys will feel very different. One works with the sea. The other works against it. Neither controls the wind. Neither created the tide. Yet both must navigate them. Life often unfolds in similar ways. There are seasons when growth seems effortless. Ideas flourish. Health strengthens. Energy expands. Opportunities appear unexpectedly. And then there are seasons when everything feels heavier. Progress slows. Recovery takes longer. Motivation fades more quickly. Simple tasks require extraordinary effort. Most people assume these differences are entirely personal. They blame themselves. Or congratulate themselves. Without ever wondering whether larger rhythms might also be involved. But perhaps human life exists within nested cycles, much like waves inside larger waves. A day exists inside a month. A month exists inside a year. A year exists inside a lifetime. Why should the pattern stop there? Could humanity itself be moving within larger currents? This question becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss when we examine what happens during periods of major solar transition. Because something remarkable appears to occur. Not only in human affairs, but within the Earth itself. The planet is not as motionless as it appears. It never has been. Beneath our feet, continents drift. Oceans shift. Tectonic plates strain against one another with unimaginable force. The ground feels solid only because our lives are brief. Viewed over centuries, Earth resembles a living system constantly adjusting itself. And researchers notice something intriguing. Periods of significant solar change often appeared alongside measurable disturbances throughout Earth's systems. The details remain subjects of scientific investigation and debate. Yet the broader insight is difficult to ignore. The Earth is not isolated. The planet participates in a larger environment. It responds. It adapts. It interacts. The universe is not a collection of disconnected objects floating through emptiness. It behaves more like an orchestra. Every instrument affects the atmosphere of the whole. A violin does not become a drum. A drum does not become a flute. Yet each contributes to a shared symphony. The earth plays its part. The sun plays its part. And perhaps humanity plays its part as well. But before we can understand our role in this orchestra, we must confront another mystery. One that hides inside the limits of human perception. Because there's a reason most people never notice these larger patterns. A reason so obvious that it is almost invisible. And once you see it, many assumptions begin to unravel. Imagine standing inside a room illuminated by a small flashlight. You can see what the beam touches. The chair. The table. The wall. Everything outside the beam remains hidden. Not because it does not exist, but because your perception never reaches it. Human experience operates in much the same way. We often mistake the limits of our perception for the limits of reality. What we cannot detect, we assume is absent. What we cannot measure, we assume does not matter. Yet history repeatedly proves otherwise. There was a time when humanity could not detect radio waves. They still existed. There was a time when bacteria remained invisible. They still existed. There was a time when entire galaxies lay beyond human observation. They still existed. Reality does not disappear simply because our senses fail to register it. And that realization opens a fascinating possibility. How much of existence unfolds beyond the boundaries of human awareness? Far more than most people imagine. Take hearing, for example. You believe you hear the world. But you hear only a tiny slice of it. A narrow band. Below that band, silence. Above that band, silence. Yet both regions are filled with sound. The sounds exist. You simply cannot detect them. Vision works the same way. Smell works the same way. Touch works the same way. Every sense operates inside carefully defined borders. Human beings live inside a perceptual window. A beautifully designed window. But still a window. Not the whole landscape. A dog detects scents that seem impossible to us. An eagle notices movements we would completely miss. Marine creatures perceive electrical signals hidden beneath the sea. Nature is filled with sensory worlds existing alongside our own. Worlds we rarely recognize because we cannot enter them. And this raises an unsettling question. If our senses reveal only a fraction of reality, what else might be happening beyond their reach? What influences move through our lives unnoticed? What forces shape us without announcing themselves? Perhaps this limitation is not a flaw. Perhaps it is protection. Imagine experiencing every signal constantly passing through reality. Every vibration. Every scent. Every frequency. Every energetic fluctuation. Every movement occurring simultaneously across the planet. The human nervous system would be overwhelmed. Thought itself might become impossible. To function, consciousness requires filters, boundaries, selective attention. The mind survives because it excludes more information than it includes. In other words, ignorance is not always weakness. Sometimes it is mercy. Yet hidden inside that mercy lies another challenge. The things excluded from awareness do not stop influencing us. The ocean continues moving beneath the ship even when passengers cannot see the currents. And this brings us to one of the most important discoveries of our journey. Because the deepest influences upon human life are rarely the loudest ones. The forces that transform destinies often arrive quietly. Like tides beneath the surface. Like seasons changing unnoticed. Like stars moving across the night sky while the sleeping world remains unaware. The question is no longer whether unseen influences exist. The evidence increasingly suggests that they do. The real question is this: how do those influences enter the human experience? Where are they recorded? How do they shape thought, emotion, health, creativity, intuition, and destiny? And most importantly, can a person learn to become conscious of patterns that have always been operating in the background? The answer: Chapter 3. The moment the window opens. Imagine sitting in a quiet room. No music is playing. No voices can be heard. No movement seems to disturb the air. And yet, at that very moment, countless signals are passing through the space around you. News broadcasts from distant cities. Conversations traveling across invisible frequencies. Music from stations hundreds of miles away. Emergency communications. Satellite transmissions. Entire worlds of information moving silently through the room. You do not hear them. Not because they are absent, but because you are not tuned to them. The moment a radio is switched on, something remarkable appears to happen. Sound suddenly emerges from silence. But that is only how it appears. The sound did not begin when the radio was activated. The sound was already there. The radio merely became capable of receiving it. This simple observation hides a profound truth about existence itself. Reality contains far more influences than human awareness can perceive. Most of what affects us arrives long before we become conscious of it. The wind touches the leaves before we notice the movement. The tide changes before the shoreline reveals it. A season begins before the first leaf changes color. And countless forces touch our lives before we become aware of their presence. This is where our journey enters deeper waters. Because what we fail to notice may still shape us. What we cannot hear may still move us. What we cannot see may still leave its mark. The universe does not require our awareness in order to influence our lives. A storm remains a storm whether anyone is watching it or not. A fragrance continues spreading through a room whether anyone consciously notices it or not. A seed continues growing beneath the soil long before anyone sees the first green shoot emerge. The influence comes first. Awareness often arrives later. Sometimes much later. And this raises a fascinating question. If unseen influences constantly surround us, how deeply do they enter into the formation of who we become? The answer may begin in the earliest moments of life. Moments so early that memory cannot reach them. Moments that vanish from conscious recollection yet continue shaping the future. Most people assume life begins gradually. That personality develops step by step. That identity emerges little by little over time. There is truth in this. But there is another layer beneath it. A layer many people never consider. The importance of first impressions. Not social first impressions. Not the first time you meet another person. Something far deeper. The first impressions consciousness receives from reality itself. Modern science has long been fascinated by what happens during the earliest stages of development. Researchers discovered that first encounters often possess extraordinary power. Far greater power than common sense would suggest. A newly emerged creature enters existence with astonishing sensitivity. The mind is open. The nervous system is receptive. The inner recording device is running. Everything matters. And what enters during those first moments can leave traces that remain for years. Sometimes for an entire lifetime. Imagine a camera containing a fresh roll of film. For a brief instant, the shutter opens. Light floods inward. An image is captured. The shutter closes. Something has been recorded. Something has become part of the permanent archive. The image may eventually fade. It may be forgotten. But it has already entered the system. In much the same way, life appears to contain certain moments when consciousness is extraordinarily receptive. Moments when impressions sink deeper than usual. Moments when reality leaves fingerprints upon the developing self. And yet this is where the mystery becomes truly interesting. Because those fingerprints are rarely created by a single influence. They emerge from an entire environment, from an atmosphere, from a field of experience, from a living context. Consider a newborn arriving into the world. The first sensations, the first sounds, the first rhythms, the first patterns, the first emotional atmosphere surrounding its arrival. Everything forms part of a larger introduction, a silent welcome into existence. Most people never think about this. Yet every beginning carries a signature. Every arrival occurs within a particular environment. Every opening scene influences the story that follows. Not in a rigid or mechanical way, but in ways subtle enough to shape tendencies, preferences, sensitivities, and responses. This principle appears repeatedly throughout nature. A young vine bends toward the first source of light it encounters. A river follows the contours present at its beginning. The earliest direction often influences the path that follows. Not because destiny is fixed, but because beginnings matter. More than most people realize. Scientists studying animal behavior uncovered examples that startled the world. Certain newly hatched birds displayed intense attachment to the first moving object they encountered. Under natural conditions, that object was usually the mother. But when researchers carefully altered the environment, something unexpected happened. The attachment followed the first encounter rather than the biological relationship itself. The young bird responded to what its developing awareness first received. The first imprint became enormously important. A simple observation, yet one carrying profound implications. Because if first impressions can influence behavior so deeply, what about human beings? What about emotional development? Relationships? Identity? The formation of trust? The experience of safety? The way we connect with others? The questions multiply faster than the answers. And perhaps that is exactly where they should. Because life is not a machine assembled from isolated parts. It is an ecosystem of influences. Every experience touches another. Every impression interacts with countless others. Every beginning contributes something to the whole. Yet there is a larger mystery waiting behind all of this. A mystery reaching beyond family, environment, culture, and personal history. A mystery concerning the invisible atmosphere into which every human being arrives. For thousands of years, thinkers, observers, and seekers wondered whether the moment of birth represented more than a biological event. They wondered whether it also represented a moment of profound connection. A moment when the individual first enters the larger field of existence. A moment when consciousness opens its window to the universe. Not a window of memory. Not a window of logic. But a window of sensitivity. And sensitivity, as we have already discovered, often operates far beyond awareness. Think again about the radio. The signal exists before reception. The influence exists before recognition. The transmission continues whether we understand it or not. Perhaps life itself unfolds in a similar way. Perhaps every human being arrives within an ocean of energies, rhythms, patterns, and influences already in motion. Perhaps we are born into a conversation that began long before our arrival. A conversation between earth and sky. Between matter and consciousness. Between the visible and the invisible. The deeper question is not whether these influences exist. The deeper question is how much of ourselves has been shaped by them without our knowledge. Because history has already provided examples of how powerful unseen forces can become. For much of human history, radiation remained invisible. People could not see it, could not hear it, could not touch it. Yet it possessed the power to alter life itself. Its effects could travel beyond a single generation, beyond a single lifetime, leaving traces that appeared years later in ways nobody initially expected. The lesson is both humbling and profound. Reality is larger than immediate perception, far larger. And whenever humanity discovers a new invisible force, one truth becomes clear. The universe has been operating according to its laws all along. Our awareness merely arrives late to the discovery. But this realization opens an even bigger question. If invisible influences can shape the body, can they also shape the mind? Can they influence temperament, sensitivity, creativity, courage, fear, potential? And if so, where exactly are these influences recorded? What hidden instrument within us receives them? What silent observer has been documenting our journey since the very beginning? The answer leads us toward one of the oldest mysteries ever explored. A mystery hidden not in the stars above us, but within the architecture of human consciousness itself. And once we begin exploring that inner landscape, the entire meaning of destiny starts to change. Chapter 4. The Ruins of Forgotten Knowledge. There is a mistake that human beings make again and again throughout history. Whenever a truth is lost, later generations often assume it never existed. If they cannot see the original structure, they imagine there was never a structure at all. But history tells a different story. Sometimes what appears to be the beginning of something is actually the remains of something much older. Imagine walking across a vast desert and discovering a few weathered stone walls rising from the sand. At first glance, they seem insignificant. Broken fragments. Scattered remnants. But an experienced archaeologist sees something else. He does not look at the walls. He looks through them. He begins imagining the arches that once connected them. The chambers that once stood between them. The people who walked those halls. The knowledge those walls once protected. A ruin is deceptive. To the untrained eye, it looks small. To the trained eye, it hints at something enormous. And perhaps nowhere is this misunderstanding more common than in humanity's relationship with ancient knowledge. Many people assume that civilization moves in a straight line. From ignorance toward wisdom. From darkness toward light. From primitive understanding toward advanced understanding. Yet history rarely moves in straight lines. Civilizations rise. Civilizations fall. Libraries burn. Languages disappear. Entire systems of knowledge vanish. Then centuries later, fragments are rediscovered and mistaken for new discoveries. The world has seen this happen countless times. A truth emerges. The truth is forgotten. Generations pass. Then someone rediscovers the same truth and receives credit for discovering it for the first time. Yet the truth itself was never new. Only our memory of it was lost. This pattern repeats so often that it almost seems to be one of history's laws. And that realization is important. Because before we decide whether an idea is foolish or profound, we should first ask a different question. Are we looking at the original building? Or are we looking at its ruins? This distinction changes everything. Many people hear the word astrology and immediately think of fortune tellers, newspaper predictions, lucky dates, and superstitions. They see only the broken stones. They assume the entire structure was built from those stones. But what if those visible fragments are not the original structure? What if they are merely the remnants of something much larger? Something far deeper? Something humanity has only partially remembered? The question is worth exploring. Because history is filled with examples of discoveries that vanished for centuries before returning again. Ideas disappear. Knowledge sleeps. Truth waits. Then someone uncovers it once more. And humanity acts surprised. Yet this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because the greatest truths are often the easiest to lose. Not because they are weak, but because they are so vast. A simple tool can survive for centuries. A profound understanding of reality is much harder to preserve. It requires living minds, living experience, living wisdom. When those disappear, only fragments remain. The shell survives. The spirit vanishes. And eventually people begin arguing over the shell. Few remember what it originally contained. That is why every generation inherits two tasks: to discover new truths, and to recover forgotten ones. The second task is often more difficult, because forgotten truths wear disguises. They arrive hidden beneath myths, legends, stories, symbols, misunderstandings, and sometimes outright nonsense. The challenge is separating the gold from the dust, not rejecting everything simply because dust surrounds it, nor accepting everything simply because it is old. Wisdom requires something more delicate: the ability to look deeper, the ability to ask better questions, the ability to distinguish between a principle and the distortions that gather around it. This brings us to a crucial distinction, one that few people ever consider. Because not all events in life belong to the same category. Not all aspects of existence operate according to the same rules. And unless we understand this distinction, confusion becomes inevitable. Imagine standing in the center of three circles. The outer circle contains events that change constantly. The middle circle contains events that can be influenced under certain conditions. The innermost circle contains something entirely different. Something fundamental. Something essential. Most people spend their entire lives fascinated by the outer circle. They want to know whether a particular opportunity will appear, whether a certain relationship will succeed, whether a business venture will prosper, whether a specific event will occur on a specific day. The attention remains fixed upon surface events. Yet surface events are endlessly changing. One decision alters them. One conversation alters them. One unexpected encounter alters them. 1,000 small variables influence their outcome. Trying to predict them with absolute certainty is like trying to predict the exact shape of every wave that will touch a shoreline next month. The question itself belongs to the wrong level of reality. And yet this is where most people focus their energy. Not because it is important, but because it is immediately interesting. The deeper questions require more courage. The deeper questions require looking inward. And so they are often avoided. But the middle circle is different. Here we find possibilities, potential futures, paths that can change through awareness. A person's health may belong partly to this realm. A society's development may belong partly to this realm. The consequences of knowledge and ignorance often belong here. Awareness creates options. Understanding opens doors. The more clearly we see, the more possibilities become available. What seemed fixed begins to soften. What seemed inevitable becomes flexible. The future becomes less like a prison and more like a landscape containing many roads. But beneath both circles lies something even deeper. The innermost circle. The essential. The core. The center. The place where existence reveals its deepest nature. And this realm does not concern itself with trivial events. It concerns being itself. The question is not what happens. The question is what you are. The question is not what tomorrow brings. The question is who experiences tomorrow. The question is not whether circumstances change. The question is what remains unchanged through all circumstances. Most human beings never arrive here. Not because the center is hidden, but because the outer circles create endless distraction. The surface generates constant noise. The center waits in silence. And silence rarely competes well with noise. Yet every great spiritual tradition eventually turns toward this center. Every profound inquiry eventually arrives there. Every authentic search eventually discovers that the deepest questions cannot be answered from the surface. This realization explains an ancient story. A story whose meaning extends far beyond the simple event itself. Imagine two travelers walking along a quiet path. Beside the path grows a young plant. Small, fragile, ordinary in appearance. One traveler glances at it casually. The other pauses, closes his eyes, and becomes completely still. To an observer, the behavior seems strange. Why pause for such a small thing? Why become silent? Why pay attention? But appearances often conceal deeper processes. The traveler is not examining the leaves. He is not measuring the stem. He is not evaluating the surface. He is attempting to sense something deeper. The inner tendency of the plant. Its direction. Its hidden momentum. Its willingness to live. Because every living thing carries an invisible intention. Some trees push through cracks in stone to reach sunlight. Some seeds wait years for the right conditions before awakening. Life possesses astonishing persistence. A force that often remains invisible until challenged. And this hidden force cannot be understood merely by looking at appearances. A plant may appear fragile yet possess tremendous resilience. A person may appear strong yet collapse under pressure. Surface appearances reveal very little. The deeper reality exists beneath them. The wise traveler understands this. That is why he waits. That is why he listens. Not with his ears. Not with his eyes. But with a deeper kind of perception. A perception concerned not with current conditions but with inner potential. What is this being moving toward? What lives within it? What is it trying to become? These questions reveal more than surface observations ever can. Because destiny, in its deepest sense, is not imposed from outside. It unfolds from within. A river reaches the ocean because of what it is. An acorn becomes an oak because of what it is. A star shines because of what it is. And a human life unfolds according to possibilities hidden deep within its own nature. The outer world matters. Circumstances matter. Challenges matter. But none of them tell the entire story. The essential factor always remains the same. What is waiting inside to emerge? And this is where our investigation takes a remarkable turn. Because if every living thing carries an inner tendency, if every life contains hidden potential, if existence itself unfolds according to deeper patterns, then an extraordinary question emerges. Can human beings learn to recognize the difference between what is merely happening to them and what is trying to emerge through them? That question leads directly into one of the most profound mysteries of human transformation. Chapter 5. The invisible thread that connects everything. The young seeker walked beside the old master carrying a question that had been troubling him for years. Can everything truly be known? He asked. Can the future be seen? Can destiny be read like a map? The master smiled. Not because the question was foolish, but because it was incomplete. Most human beings ask questions about events. Very few ask questions about existence. And there is an enormous difference between the two. An event is something that happens. Existence is what remains while events come and go. A storm is an event. The sky is existence. A birth is an event. Life is existence. A death is an event. Consciousness is existence. Most people become fascinated by the storms and forget to look at the sky. That is why they spend their lives chasing predictions. They want to know what will happen next. Will success arrive? Will failure arrive? Will wealth come? Will love stay? Will opportunities appear? Will danger be avoided? Yet beneath all these questions lies a deeper one that almost nobody asks. Who is the one experiencing these events? Because until that question is explored, every answer remains incomplete. This is where the ancient understanding we are exploring begins to separate itself from popular ideas about fortune-telling. The deeper inquiry was never primarily concerned with events. It was concerned with participation. Not what happens to you, but how you participate in the unfolding of existence. Not whether rain falls, but whether you dance in it or hide from it. Not whether death comes, but what kind of being you become before it arrives. There is a profound difference. And that difference changes everything. The misunderstanding began when people became obsessed with the surface of life. Surface questions are attractive because they promise certainty. Human beings crave certainty. The unknown makes them uncomfortable. So they ask, how long will I live? Will my business succeed? Will my marriage survive? Will I become rich? Will my plans work? These questions feel important, but they belong mostly to the changing surface of existence. The deeper inquiry asks something entirely different. What kind of person are you becoming while seeking wealth? What is happening to your consciousness while pursuing success? If life grants you another 50 years, what will you do with them? If tomorrow arrives exactly as you wish, who will you be when it does? Suddenly the focus shifts. The center of gravity moves inward. And that shift marks the beginning of wisdom. Because events alone cannot transform a human being. Understanding can. A man may live 90 years and remain asleep to himself. Another may live 30 years and awaken completely. The length of the journey is not the deepest question. The quality of awareness within the journey is. Yet this is where the story becomes even more fascinating. Because there are certain things in life that appear flexible. And there are certain things that seem woven into the very fabric of existence. The challenge is learning the difference. Imagine a mighty river descending from a mountain range. Its destination is the ocean. That much is certain. The river will eventually find the sea. But the exact path it follows may vary. It may curve eastward. It may curve westward. It may flow through forests or deserts. It may encounter obstacles and find new routes around them. The destination belongs to one realm. The route belongs to another. Most people spend their lives staring at the route. The sages became interested in the destination. The route changes constantly. The destination reveals something essential. This distinction explains countless mysteries about human experience. Many aspects of life remain open. Choices matter. Awareness matters. Effort matters. Knowledge matters. Ignorance matters. They alter pathways. They create alternatives. They influence outcomes. Yet beneath these shifting possibilities lies a deeper movement. A movement unique to every soul. A hidden tendency. A direction. A calling. An inner current trying to express itself through a human life. And this current belongs to something more fundamental than circumstance. You can see glimpses of it everywhere. Some people are drawn toward beauty from childhood. Others toward truth. Others toward creativity. Others toward understanding. Others toward service. Others toward exploration. The forms may change. The expression may evolve. But the inner movement remains surprisingly consistent. As if something within is quietly trying to complete itself. Trying to become fully visible. Trying to flower. This deeper movement is what the great teachers sought to understand. Not whether a particular event would occur on a particular Tuesday 50 years from now. Such questions belong to the surface. The deeper inquiry concerned the unfolding of consciousness itself. Who are you becoming? What is trying to emerge through you? What potential remains hidden? What possibility waits to be awakened? These questions lead toward the heart of the mystery. And once they are asked sincerely, an extraordinary realization begins to emerge. No human being exists alone. Not psychologically. Not biologically. Not spiritually. Not cosmically. We are intersections. Meeting points. Living crossroads where countless streams of influence converge. Think about your own existence for a moment. Your parents contributed to it. Their parents contributed to it. Generations stretching backward through time contributed to it. Every decision they made helped shape the circumstances that eventually allowed your life to appear. This much is easy to understand. The past lives within you. Its fingerprints are everywhere. Its stories echo through your thoughts, habits, fears, talents, and possibilities. But there is another dimension that is more difficult to grasp. One that sounds impossible until it is deeply contemplated. What if the future also participates in creating the present? At first this seems absurd. How can something that has not yet happened influence what exists now? The mind immediately resists. And yet, look carefully. A bridge under construction is shaped by the completed bridge that exists only in the architect's vision. A musician practices today because of a performance that has not yet occurred. A tree grows towards sunlight it has not yet reached. The future exerts a strange pull. Not as a physical object, but as a possibility, as a direction, as an invitation. The present is not merely pushed forward by the past. It is also pulled forward by what seeks to become real. Life unfolds between memory and possibility, between what has been and what wishes to be, between roots and horizons. When the awakened ones spoke about interconnectedness, this is part of what they were pointing toward. The present moment stands between two infinities. The past supports it. The future calls it. Remove either one and the whole structure collapses. Imagine a climber suspended between two cliffs. His feet rest upon one side. His hands grasp the other. Both are necessary. Take away the cliff beneath him, and he falls. Take away the cliff ahead of him, and he falls just as surely. Human existence is remarkably similar. We are supported by what came before. We are guided by what has not yet arrived. And in the middle of these two vast mysteries stands the present moment. This realization transforms the meaning of destiny. Destiny is not a prison. It is not a script imposed from outside. It is not a chain that removes freedom. It is something far more subtle. Destiny is the meeting point between your deepest nature and the larger intelligence of the universe. The meeting point between individual possibility and cosmic participation. The place where the river discovers the ocean it has always been moving toward. And once this is understood, gratitude begins to arise naturally. Not as a moral duty, not as a spiritual exercise, but as a simple recognition of reality. Because nothing meaningful is ever accomplished alone. A flower blooms because the soil helped. Because the rain helped. Because sunlight helped. Because invisible processes helped. Because existence itself participated. The flower receives the credit. Yet the entire cosmos contributed. The same is true of every human achievement. Every insight. Every awakening. Every act of love. Every moment of understanding. Behind each one stands an immeasurable network of support. Seen and unseen. Known and unknown. This is why the wisest individuals throughout history often became more humble as they grew more enlightened. Not less humble. The more clearly they saw reality, the more impossible it became to claim sole ownership of anything. They understood that life itself is a collaboration. A vast cosmic partnership unfolding across time and space. And that understanding leads us to one of the most beautiful questions of all. If every moment is connected to everything else, if every life participates in a larger unfolding, if the entire universe is engaged in a continuous dance of influence and becoming, then what is the hidden force that keeps this immense harmony together? What is the silent intelligence beneath the movements of stars, planets, rivers, forests, and human hearts? Because somewhere beneath all these visible connections lies a deeper principle. A principle so fundamental that once it is seen, separation itself begins to look like an illusion. And that is where the next stage of our journey begins. Chapter 6. The space between destiny and choice. Few questions have followed humanity as faithfully as this one. Are we truly free? Or is everything already decided? For thousands of years, philosophers argued over it. Mystics contemplated it. Scientists approached it from different directions. Ordinary people wrestled with it in moments of regret and uncertainty. Was that decision really mine? Could I have chosen differently? Or was I simply acting out a script written long before I arrived? At first glance, the question seems simple. But hidden beneath it is one of the deepest mysteries of human existence. Because if everything is predetermined, then responsibility becomes meaningless. Why praise kindness if cruelty was unavoidable? Why condemn dishonesty if honesty was never possible? Why encourage growth if every outcome has already been fixed? Yet the opposite extreme creates an equally troubling problem. If everything is completely random, if existence operates without pattern, order, or deeper intelligence, then meaning itself begins to collapse. Growth becomes accidental. Wisdom becomes accidental. Love becomes accidental. Even consciousness becomes an accident. Neither conclusion feels complete. And perhaps that is because reality belongs to either extreme. Reality is subtler. Far subtler. Imagine standing at a fork in a forest trail. Two paths stretch before you. One bends toward a valley flooded with sunlight. The other disappears into a dense maze of shadows. At this moment, both roads remain available. You are free. You may choose either direction. No invisible force physically drags you toward one trail or the other. The choice is yours. But the moment you take a step, something changes. The path you select begins creating consequences. The freedom remains real. Yet the consequences become increasingly inevitable. One step leads to another. One direction opens certain possibilities while quietly closing others. The farther you travel, the more the chosen road shapes what comes next. Life operates in much the same way. Freedom exists. But freedom exists within structure. Choice exists. But choice creates momentum. Every decision becomes the architect of future decisions. Every action quietly reshapes the landscape through which tomorrow must travel. This is why so many people misunderstand destiny. They imagine destiny as a prison, a cosmic chain, a script that cannot be altered. But perhaps destiny is something else entirely. Perhaps destiny is the interaction between possibility and consequence, between freedom and pattern, between choice and law. A sailor cannot control the ocean, but he can adjust his sails. He cannot command the wind, but he can learn to navigate it. His freedom exists. Yet it exists within larger realities. The ocean remains the ocean. The wind remains the wind. The stars remain the stars. Wisdom does not consist of denying these forces. Wisdom consists of learning how to cooperate with them. This understanding resolves many apparent contradictions. Because human beings are either completely free nor completely trapped. We are participants, co-creators, partners in a much larger process. The universe provides conditions. We provide responses. Life offers possibilities. We make selections. And each selection gradually shapes the person we become. Yet this is where the mystery deepens. Because not all choices carry equal weight. Some decisions merely alter circumstances. Others alter character. And character belongs to a much deeper level of existence. Consider a single dishonest act. At first, it appears small. A moment. An event. A choice. Nothing more. But something invisible also occurs. The act leaves a trace. A subtle imprint. A pathway. The next dishonest act becomes slightly easier. Then easier still. Eventually, what began as a choice starts resembling a habit. And habits slowly crystallize into identity. The person begins believing, "This is simply who I am." Yet it was never who they were. It was only the accumulation of repeated choices. This is how freedom gradually transforms into structure. And structure gradually becomes destiny. The same principle works in reverse. A courageous action makes future courage easier. An act of compassion strengthens the capacity for compassion. A commitment to truth deepens one's relationship with truth. Every choice plants seeds. Every seed eventually becomes an environment. And every environment influences future choices. This is the hidden architecture of human development. Most people notice only the visible action. Few notice the invisible construction taking place beneath it. Yet that invisible construction determines far more than the action itself. And this is where many lives quietly drift away from their deepest possibilities. Not because they intended to. Not because they desired failure. But because they underestimated the significance of small choices. A ship rarely goes off course because of one dramatic mistake. More often, it drifts degree by degree. A slight deviation. Then another. Then another. Months later, it arrives somewhere entirely different. Human lives follow similar trajectories. The center is rarely lost all at once. It is lost through repeated movement toward the outer edges. Toward distraction. Toward unconsciousness. Toward reaction rather than awareness. And yet the center never disappears. It waits. Patiently. Quietly. Like a lighthouse continuing to shine through fog. No matter how far a ship drifts, the lighthouse remains. No matter how confused a person becomes, something essential remains untouched. This brings us to one of the most important distinctions in our journey. There is a part of life that belongs to circumstances. And there is a part that belongs to essence. Circumstances change constantly. Jobs appear and disappear. Relationships begin and end. Fortunes rise and fall. Bodies grow stronger and weaker. Nations emerge and vanish. Entire civilizations transform. The surface never stops moving. But beneath all movement exists something deeper. Something enduring. Something that seeks expression through every experience. This is the essential dimension of existence. The dimension most people rarely explore. Because attention remains captured by events. The wave becomes more interesting than the ocean. The weather becomes more interesting than the sky. The moment becomes more interesting than the consciousness experiencing it. And so life becomes fragmented. The deeper unity remains unseen. Yet every awakened individual throughout history eventually discovered the same truth. The separate self is not as separate as it appears. The individual life is not isolated. It belongs to something larger. A musician may believe he creates the music alone. But remove the instrument, and there is no music. Remove the air, and there is no sound. Remove generations of musical knowledge, and there is no composition. Remove the listeners, and the experience remains incomplete. What appeared individual was actually collective all along. The same is true of every human achievement. Every success. Every discovery. Every awakening. Look closely enough and you will find an entire universe participating. This realization dissolves a certain kind of pride. Not healthy confidence. Not self-respect. But the illusion of separateness. The illusion that says, I alone accomplished this. I alone created this. I alone am responsible for this. The deeper one looks, the less convincing that story becomes. Because existence reveals itself as an endless web of participation. Every breath depends on forests. Every meal depends on soil. Every thought depends on language. Every life depends on countless lives before it. Nothing stands alone. Nothing ever has. The universe is less like a collection of isolated objects, and more like a living symphony. Each note seems separate. Yet every note belongs to the same music. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson hidden beneath the mystery of destiny. You are either a prisoner, nor a sovereign ruler. You are either completely bound nor completely free. You are a participant in a living cosmos. A traveler moving within patterns larger than yourself. A unique expression of something infinite. The moment this is understood, a strange peace begins to emerge. The need to control everything starts to soften. The fear of uncertainty loses some of its grip. The obsession with personal victory begins to fade. Because you realize that life was never solely about winning. It was about participating consciously. It was about learning the rhythm of existence. It was about discovering how your individual song fits within the larger music of the universe. But there is one final illusion that still remains. Perhaps the deepest illusion of all. The illusion that says, I am separate. I stand apart. I exist independently from the whole. As long as that illusion survives, suffering continues to find fertile ground. And in the next stage of our journey, we will explore why the collapse of that illusion may be the beginning of true freedom. Chapter 7. The music hidden in the stars. There are ideas that disappear because they are false. And then there are ideas that disappear because they arrive before humanity is ready to understand them. The second kind is far more dangerous. Because when a profound insight is forgotten, generations later it often returns wearing the mask of superstition. People no longer remember the living truth that once existed beneath it. They remember only fragments. Symbols. Rituals. Distortions. Broken pieces of a once coherent vision. And few subjects illustrate this more clearly than the ancient attempt to understand the relationship between humanity and the cosmos. Today, many people hear discussions about celestial influence, and immediately imagine fortune tellers, vague predictions, and magical thinking. Yet long before such simplifications appeared, there existed a far deeper question. A question so fundamental that it helped shape the birth of mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. The question was simple. What is the relationship between human life and the larger universe? Not symbolically. Not poetically. Literally. Is human existence isolated? Or is it woven into a larger fabric of cosmic order? This question fascinated some of the earliest observers of the night sky. They spent lifetimes watching patterns most people ignored. Night after night. Year after year. Generation after generation. While others slept, they watched. While empires rose and fell, they watched. While wars were fought and forgotten, they watched. And slowly a startling realization began to emerge. The heavens were not chaotic. They were ordered. Extraordinarily ordered. The stars moved according to rhythms. The planets followed patterns. Cycles repeated. Movements synchronized. The sky behaved less like a battlefield and more like an immense symphony. A symphony so vast that an individual human life seemed almost insignificant beside it. Yet this is where the mystery deepened. Because the observers began noticing something else. The rhythms in the sky appeared to correspond with rhythms on Earth. Not perfectly. Not mechanically. But often enough to provoke serious investigation. Something seemed connected. Something seemed to echo across vastly different scales of existence. And that possibility changed everything. Because if Earth and sky participate in the same larger order, then human beings may not be isolated observers of the cosmos. We may be participants within it. This realization inspired some of humanity's earliest scientific efforts. Long before modern laboratories existed, observers were measuring cycles, recording movements, comparing patterns, and searching for relationships. Many of them devoted entire lifetimes to this pursuit. Not because they wished to predict trivial events, but because they sensed a deeper principle hidden beneath appearances. A principle that might reveal how life itself is organized. Yet this was only the beginning. The deeper investigation led towards something even more extraordinary. A possibility that initially sounds almost impossible. The possibility that existence itself is structured like music. Pause for a moment and consider what music really is. Most people think music is made of notes. But notes alone are not music. Random sounds do not create a symphony. Music emerges when relationships appear between sounds. When frequencies interact. When vibrations align. When rhythm and harmony cooperate. The beauty of a symphony is not found in individual notes. It is found in their relationship. And what if reality itself functions in a similar way? What if health, emotion, consciousness, creativity, and even fulfillment arise from forms of harmony? What if suffering often appears when harmony is lost? The idea sounds poetic. Yet modern science increasingly recognizes that life itself depends upon synchronization. The heart depends upon rhythm. The brain depends upon coordinated electrical patterns. Cells communicate through astonishing levels of organization. Biological systems thrive when harmony exists. Disorder creates dysfunction. Balance creates vitality. The principle appears everywhere. A healthy ecosystem depends upon balance. A healthy relationship depends upon balance. A healthy mind depends upon balance. Why should the larger universe be any different? This question captivated many ancient thinkers. Among them was a remarkable philosopher who viewed existence through the lens of music. He proposed that the movements of celestial bodies created something like a cosmic orchestra. Not necessarily music that human ears could hear, but a deeper harmony woven into the architecture of reality itself. A universal order. A hidden arrangement. An invisible music shaping the structure of existence. At first glance, the idea seems mystical. But look more carefully. Modern physics already describes reality in terms of frequencies, vibrations, oscillations, and energetic patterns. The language has changed. The instruments have changed. Yet the underlying intuition remains surprisingly familiar. Perhaps existence is not built from isolated objects. Perhaps it is built from relationships, from interactions, from harmonies. And if that is true, a fascinating implication follows. Health may not merely be the absence of disease. Health may be the presence of harmony. This possibility inspired a revolutionary idea centuries ago. The idea suggested that every human being enters life with a unique pattern of resonance, a unique energetic arrangement, a unique relationship to existence, not unlike a musical instrument receiving its initial tuning. And throughout life, well-being depends partly upon maintaining alignment with that deeper tuning. When alignment exists, vitality flourishes. When alignment is lost, suffering begins to appear. Whether this principle is ultimately explained through biology, psychology, neuroscience, energy systems, or discoveries yet to come remains an open question. But the intuition itself remains profound. Perhaps health is not something we manufacture. Perhaps health is something we return to. Perhaps healing is less like building and more like tuning. Less like forcing and more like aligning. This would explain many mysteries of human experience. Why some people appear physically healthy yet feel deeply disconnected. Why others endure difficulty yet radiate vitality. Why fulfillment often depends upon inner coherence rather than external success. And why a person can possess everything they once desired yet still feel strangely out of tune with life. Because the deepest forms of health may not concern possessions. They may concern harmony. Yet harmony with what? This is where the mystery grows larger. Much larger. Because if human beings possess an inner tuning, what exactly are we being tuned to? To society? To culture? To personal ambition? To family expectations? Or to something far more fundamental? Perhaps the answer lies in a truth we have been circling throughout this entire journey. The truth that human beings are not separate from the universe. We are expressions of it. Just as a wave is an expression of the ocean. Just as a leaf is an expression of the tree. Just as a note is an expression of the symphony. The individual appears separate only when viewed in isolation. Viewed more deeply, the connection becomes obvious. And once that connection is recognized, an entirely new possibility emerges. Perhaps the purpose of life is not merely achievement. Not merely survival. Not merely success. Perhaps the deeper invitation is participation. To discover one's place within the larger harmony. to recognize the music already moving through existence. To stop fighting the rhythm and begin listening to it. Because every human being, whether aware of it or not, is searching for harmony. Some search through wealth. Some through relationships. Some through power. Some through knowledge. Some through spirituality. Yet beneath all these pursuits lies the same longing. The longing to feel aligned. The longing to feel whole. The longing to feel at home within existence itself. And that longing may be pointing towards something far more important than we realize. Because if the universe truly operates through deeper patterns of harmony, then the greatest challenge is not predicting the future. The greatest challenge is learning how to hear the music. And once we begin hearing it, another question naturally arises. If every human being carries a unique pattern of resonance, what exactly is the instrument through which that resonance is experienced? Where inside us is this hidden receiver? What part of human consciousness remembers the original harmony and continually longs to return to it? The answer takes us deeper than the stars, deeper than the mind, deeper than personality itself. And that is where the next stage of our exploration begins. Chapter 8. The Cosmic Orchestra. Imagine walking into a concert hall moments before a symphony begins. The musicians are already seated. The violinists are tuning their strings. The cellists are adjusting their instruments. The percussionists wait silently in the background. At first, what you hear sounds like chaos. Random notes. Disconnected sounds. Fragments without meaning. But then the conductor raises a hand. And suddenly something extraordinary happens. The noise becomes music. The separate sounds reveal a hidden relationship. The fragments become a whole. What seemed disconnected was never truly disconnected. The harmony was present from the beginning. Only your understanding was incomplete. This simple image may offer one of the most powerful ways to understand the mystery we have been exploring. For centuries, human beings looked at the universe and saw isolated objects. A star here. A planet there. A human being on Earth. Separate things occupying separate places. But what if that perception is as incomplete as hearing individual notes without recognizing the symphony? What if the deeper reality is not separation but relationship? Not isolation but participation? Not objects but patterns? This possibility fascinated a remarkable physician centuries ago. Unlike most doctors of his time, he was not satisfied with merely suppressing symptoms. He wanted to understand what health actually was. Not what disease was. Not what sickness looked like. But what genuine health meant. The distinction appears small. Yet it changes everything. Most definitions of health are strangely negative. Ask an ordinary person what it means to be healthy, and they often respond by describing what is absent. No fever. No pain. No illness. No disorder. But consider how strange that is. Imagine defining music as the absence of noise. Imagine defining love as the absence of loneliness. Imagine defining light as the absence of darkness. Something essential would be missing. Because health is not merely the absence of disease. Health is a presence. A positive state. A living reality. A harmony. And this physician became convinced that until humanity understood that harmony, medicine would remain incomplete. He believed that every person possesses an inner arrangement. A unique pattern. A personal symphony. And illness appears when that symphony drifts away from its natural balance. The symptoms are not the problem. They are signals. Messages. Warnings. The real issue lies deeper. The orchestra has fallen out of tune. One instrument is playing against the others. A rhythm has been lost. A harmony has been disturbed. Treating only the symptoms, he argued, is like silencing a warning bell without investigating the fire. The noise disappears. The danger remains. This insight was centuries ahead of its time. Yet something remarkable has happened during the last 100 years. Modern science has slowly begun discovering evidence that points in a surprisingly similar direction. Not through ancient philosophy, not through mystical speculation, but through experimentation, observation, measurement. The language is different. The tools are different. Yet the implications are strangely familiar. Scientists increasingly describe reality as a network of relationships. Nothing exists entirely by itself. Everything participates in larger systems. Every organism depends upon ecosystems. Every ecosystem depends upon planetary conditions. Every planet exists within larger cosmic processes. Pull one thread and countless others move. Change one element and distant consequences emerge. Reality behaves less like a machine assembled from separate parts, and more like a living organism. A single body. A vast interconnected whole. This realization gave birth to entirely new ways of thinking. Researchers began exploring whether influences travel across enormous distances in ways humanity had previously overlooked. Could activity in one part of a system affect another? Could seemingly unrelated events actually be connected through hidden relationships? At first, these questions sounded outrageous. But then evidence began accumulating. Patterns appeared. Anomalies surfaced. Unexpected correlations emerged. The deeper scientists looked, the less isolated reality seemed. The universe increasingly resembled a living conversation. And nowhere was this more intriguing than in the relationship between life on Earth and activity beyond it. Researchers studying solar cycles discovered subtle effects that appeared throughout biological systems. Tiny fluctuations. Delicate changes. Small but measurable responses. The implications were profound. Because if biological life responds to larger cosmic rhythms, then life is not sealed off from the universe. It participates in it. Just as an ocean wave participates in the movement of the sea. Just as a leaf participates in the life of a tree. The individual remains unique. Yet the individual never exists independently. This understanding led to another fascinating question. How does a human being enter this larger field of relationships? What happens at the moment life begins? Why does the timing of birth seem so important in nearly every ancient tradition? The common assumption is simple. A child is born. The clock records the time. The calendar records the date. And that information becomes a convenient label. Nothing more. Yet ancient observers suspected something deeper. They believed the moment of birth represented more than a timestamp. They believed it represented an entry point. A moment of arrival into a particular configuration of reality. To understand this idea, imagine standing on a shoreline. The ocean never looks exactly the same twice. The waves are different. The winds are different. The tides are different. The light is different. The atmosphere is different. Every moment possesses its own unique arrangement. Now imagine launching thousands of boats. Some leave during calm seas. Others leave during storms. Some depart under bright skies. Others beneath heavy clouds. The boats may be identical. Yet the conditions surrounding their departure are not. And those conditions influence the journey that follows. Not completely. Not mechanically. But undeniably. The ancient observers viewed birth in a similar way. The universe is always moving. Always changing. Always rearranging its immense patterns. Every birth occurs within a unique cosmic atmosphere. A unique energetic weather. A unique arrangement of relationships. The birth chart, in its deepest interpretation, was never intended as a prison of destiny. It was intended as a map of conditions. A snapshot of the larger symphony at the moment an individual entered the stage. Yet this is where misunderstanding began. Many people assumed that if two individuals were born under similar conditions, they must become identical. But reality never works that way. A seed and another seed may grow in the same forest. One becomes towering and strong. The other remains small. The environment matters. Yet potential matters too. Choices matter. Awareness matters. Participation matters. The map is not the journey. The weather is not the traveler. The score is not the musician. Two pianists can play the same composition. One produces beauty. The other produces noise. The sheet music did not determine the outcome. Conscious participation did. This distinction is essential. Because the deeper wisdom we are exploring has never claimed that human beings are puppets controlled by distant stars. Its claim is far more subtle, far more profound. It suggests that every individual arrives within a larger pattern, a larger field, a larger harmony, and understanding that harmony allows a person to live more consciously within it. The sailor who understands the winds navigates more skillfully. The musician who understands rhythm performs more beautifully. The gardener who understands the seasons grows healthier crops. Knowledge does not eliminate freedom. Knowledge refines it. The more deeply we understand the larger patterns surrounding us, the more intelligently we can participate in them. And perhaps this is why the oldest wisdom traditions repeatedly return to the same insight. The goal was never prediction. The goal was alignment. Not control. Not domination. Not certainty. Alignment. To discover one's place within the larger music of existence. To recognize the rhythms already moving through life. To cooperate rather than struggle. To participate rather than resist. And yet an even deeper mystery remains hidden beneath this idea. Because if the universe is truly an interconnected living symphony, if every human being carries a unique pattern of resonance, if health itself is a form of harmony, then what exactly is the instrument through which this cosmic music is heard? What is it inside us that responds to these invisible rhythms? What part of human consciousness remembers a harmony it cannot fully explain? The answer leads beyond the body, beyond thought, beyond personality, into a dimension of human experience so intimate that most people spend their entire lives overlooking it. And that is where the next revelation awaits. Chapter 9. The Signature of a Moment. There are moments in life that appear ordinary while they are happening. A door closes. A train departs. A stranger enters a room. A seed falls into the soil. Nothing dramatic seems to occur. Yet years later, entire destinies can be traced back to those seemingly insignificant moments. The mystery of life is that importance rarely announces itself. The events that shape the future often arrive quietly, almost invisibly. And perhaps no moment is more mysterious than the moment a life begins. For centuries, people argued about whether the circumstances surrounding birth truly matter. Skeptics dismissed the idea. Believers embraced it. Philosophers debated it. Scientists questioned it. Yet beneath the arguments lay a deeper question that few were asking. Not whether the stars control a human being, but whether the moment of arrival into existence leaves a unique imprint upon life itself. This distinction changes everything. Because control and influence are not the same thing. The ocean influences every ship that sails upon it. Yet the ocean does not control the sailor. The weather influences every journey. Yet the weather does not determine every destination. Influence is subtle. It creates conditions. It establishes possibilities. It shapes environments. And perhaps life begins within such conditions. Perhaps every birth is not merely a biological event but an entry into a particular arrangement of existence. A unique pattern. A unique atmosphere. A unique cosmic weather. And this idea, once dismissed as fantasy, has slowly begun finding echoes in unexpected places. Not through superstition. Not through blind belief. But through observation. Through patterns that refuse to disappear. through mysteries that continue resurfacing no matter how often they are ignored. One of those mysteries appears in the lives of twins. And what researchers discovered there is both fascinating and unsettling. Imagine two people who begin life from exactly the same biological origin. Not simply siblings. Not merely children of the same parents. But two lives emerging from a single beginning. One spark becoming two flames. At first, we might assume that environment explains everything. Raise them together and similarities are expected. Raise them apart and differences should emerge. The logic seems straightforward. Yet reality turned out to be far more complicated. Across decades of observation, researchers noticed astonishing parallels. Twins separated by geography often develop similar habits, similar preferences, similar fears, similar strengths, sometimes even similar life choices. The similarities were not always identical, but they were frequent enough to raise profound questions. Questions that challenge the assumption that environment alone explains who we become. Something deeper appeared to be operating. Something hidden beneath upbringing. Something already present at the beginning. This discovery opened an entirely new doorway. Because if two lives sharing the same origin continue expressing remarkable similarities despite different environments, then perhaps the beginning matters more than we previously imagined. And this is where the mystery grows even deeper. Because identical twins do not merely share parents. They share a moment. A single point of arrival. A single opening into existence. A shared entry into the larger field of life. The implications are extraordinary. For what exactly is contained within a moment? Most people think of a moment as a point on a clock. A number. A measurement. A timestamp. But a moment is far more than that. A moment is an arrangement. The entire universe occupies a unique configuration at every instant. The Earth stands in a particular position. The Sun occupies a particular relationship. Countless forces interact in specific ways. The atmosphere differs. The magnetic environment differs. The biological environment differs. Nothing remains exactly the same from one instant to the next. Existence is continuously rearranging itself. And every birth occurs within one of those arrangements. Within one unique cosmic snapshot. The ancient observers understood this intuitively. They saw time not as a series of numbers but as living conditions. They believed that every moment carried its own character. Its own flavor. Its own possibilities. Its own invitation. Modern language may describe these things differently. But the essential insight remains compelling. Life does not begin in a vacuum. Every beginning emerges from a context. A field. A larger environment. And the environment always matters. Consider a seed. The seed contains its own potential. Yet that potential expresses itself differently depending upon the season in which it is planted. The soil surrounding it. The amount of sunlight it receives. The conditions into which it emerges. Potential and environment dance together. May their works alone. Human beings appear to operate according to the same principle. A person arrives carrying certain possibilities, certain tendencies, certain latent capacities. Yet those capacities unfold within larger conditions. The relationship is dynamic. Not mechanical. Not predetermined. But profoundly interconnected. And nowhere is this interconnection more evident than in the strange phenomenon researchers discovered among identical twins. The deeper they looked, the harder it became to dismiss the significance of shared beginnings. Even physical characteristics revealed unexpected mysteries. Modern medicine encountered puzzles it struggled to explain. Why would certain biological compatibilities exist only between individuals sharing an identical origin? Why would bodies recognize one another in ways that seemed invisible to ordinary measurement? Why would certain patterns repeat with such consistency? The questions multiplied. And each question pointed toward the same possibility. Perhaps life contains layers of organization we have only begun to understand. Layers operating beneath conscious awareness. Layers shaping experience long before thought becomes involved. This realization has profound implications. Because if life is influenced by hidden structures present from the beginning, then human beings are not blank slates arriving in a meaningless universe. We arrive carrying patterns, potentials, blueprints, possibilities, not fixed destinies, not unavoidable outcomes, but living tendencies waiting to be expressed. This distinction is essential. A blueprint is not a building. A map is not a journey. A musical score is not a performance. The beginning matters. Yet what happens afterward matters too. Potential requires participation. Possibility requires choice. The future remains alive. And this brings us to one of the most subtle misunderstandings in the entire discussion. Many people imagine that acknowledging hidden influences somehow destroys freedom. But the opposite may be true. Understanding influences may be what makes freedom possible. A sailor who understands the currents gains greater freedom upon the sea. A musician who understands harmony gains greater freedom within music. An athlete who understands the laws of movement gains greater freedom in performance. Knowledge does not imprison. Knowledge liberates. It allows conscious participation. And perhaps this is what humanity is gradually discovering. Not that life is controlled by invisible forces, but that life unfolds within a vast network of relationships. Relationships so subtle that earlier generations could sense them but could not measure them. Relationships that modern science is only beginning to glimpse. The deeper we look, the more interconnected reality appears. The boundaries separating things become less absolute. The walls begin to thin. The illusion of isolation starts to dissolve. And once that illusion begins to fade, another remarkable question emerges. If birth leaves an imprint, if beginnings matter, if every life enters existence carrying unique patterns and possibilities, then where exactly are those patterns stored? What is the mechanism through which existence remembers? How does a moment leave a signature upon a lifetime? The answer leads us toward one of the most astonishing discoveries of all. A discovery suggesting that memory may not belong solely to the brain. That life itself may remember. That nature may remember. And that the universe may be carrying records far older and deeper than humanity has ever imagined. And that is where the next doorway opens. Chapter 10. There is a strange arrogance hidden inside modern life. We assume that because we cannot see a connection, no connection exists. We assume that because our instruments have not measured something, it cannot be real. Yet history repeatedly humbles such assumptions. There was a time when humanity could not see bacteria. They existed. There was a time when people could not detect radio waves. They existed. There was a time when no one knew that entire galaxies floated beyond the night sky visible to the naked eye. They existed. Reality has never been limited by human awareness. And perhaps one of the greatest lessons hidden within nature is this. Life knows far more than the conscious mind. A migrating bird knows something no map teaches. A seed knows something no university explains. A newborn child arrives carrying forms of intelligence that existed long before language. Something ancient moves beneath thought. Something deeper than reasoning. Something older than memory. And the more carefully we observe life, the more often this hidden intelligence reveals itself. Imagine standing on a remote coastline before dawn. The ocean appears calm. The horizon is empty. Nothing dramatic seems to be happening. Yet beneath the surface, invisible currents are already moving thousands of miles of water. Deep beneath the waves, entire systems are communicating. Temperatures are shifting. Pressures are changing. Movements are unfolding that will eventually reshape distant shores. The surface appears silent. The depths are busy. Human life may function in much the same way. What we call consciousness is often only the surface. Beneath it flows an immense ocean of sensitivities we barely understand. And this may explain why living creatures often respond to events before those events become visible. Why do certain animals become restless before storms? Why do birds alter their paths before weather changes? Why do entire ecosystems seem to anticipate shifts that human instruments struggle to predict? The answer may not lie in extraordinary intelligence. It may lie in extraordinary sensitivity. A sensitivity modern humans have gradually forgotten. As civilization grew more complex, humanity gained remarkable powers. We learned to build machines. We learned to manipulate matter. We learned to send signals across continents and satellites across the heavens. Yet while gaining these abilities, we may have neglected another form of knowing. The ability to feel life directly. The ability to sense subtle shifts before they become obvious. The ability to participate consciously in the vast conversation constantly occurring between living things and the universe itself. This conversation never stops. Every tree participates. Every river participates. Every cloud participates. Every living cell participates. The question is not whether the conversation exists. The question is whether we are listening. And here an important realization begins to emerge. Perhaps astrology, in its deepest form, was never primarily about predicting events. Perhaps prediction became the distraction. Perhaps prediction became the marketplace version of something far more profound. The original inquiry may have been entirely different. The ancient question may not have been, "What will happen to me?" The ancient question may have been, "What am I connected to?" These are radically different questions. The first arises from fear. The second arises from wonder. The first seeks control. The second seeks understanding. The first wants certainty. The second wants relationship. And when we shift from prediction to participation, an entirely new picture appears. Instead of seeing ourselves as isolated individuals struggling against life, we begin seeing ourselves as living expressions of a larger intelligence. The forest does not exist tree by tree. It exists as a living network. The ocean does not exist wave by wave. It exists as a living movement. The sky does not exist cloud by cloud. It exists as a living atmosphere. And perhaps human beings are not separate fragments either. Perhaps we are temporary expressions of something infinitely larger. This idea is difficult for the ego. Because the ego prefers independence. It prefers ownership. It prefers the feeling of standing alone. Yet nature tells a different story. No leaf creates itself. No river flows by itself. No star burns for itself. Everything participates in everything else. The universe appears less like a collection of objects and more like a symphony. A symphony cannot be understood by isolating a single note. A note gains meaning only through its relationship with every other note. And human life may work exactly the same way. Your fears are not entirely yours. Your strengths are not entirely yours. Your opportunities are not entirely yours. Your existence itself is the result of countless visible and invisible relationships stretching across time. Ancestors you never met. Events you never witnessed. Choices made generations ago. Forces moving through nature. Patterns unfolding across history. All converging into the single moment called you. And yet this realization contains neither helplessness nor limitation. In fact, it contains freedom. Because when you understand that life is relational, you stop fighting reality. You begin cooperating with it. A sailor cannot command the wind. But a sailor who understands the wind can travel farther than one who ignores it. A musician cannot change the laws of harmony. But a musician who understands harmony can create beauty. A gardener cannot force a seed to grow. But a gardener who understands seasons can cultivate abundance. Wisdom is not domination. Wisdom is alignment. This may be the forgotten heart of the ancient sciences. not control. Alignment, not prediction. Participation, not fear. Understanding. And yet one mystery remains. If every living thing is connected through invisible currents, if life is constantly responding to influences beyond ordinary awareness, if hidden sensitivities guide migrations, growth, health, and even human tendencies, then another question naturally emerges. What exactly is this invisible web connecting everything? What is the medium through which distant stars, living organisms, human consciousness, and nature itself remain linked? For centuries this question remained unanswered. But slowly, unexpectedly, modern discoveries began pointing toward a possibility so astonishing that it challenges our entire understanding of separation. A possibility suggesting that the universe may not be a collection of disconnected things at all, but a single living field expressing itself in countless forms. And once we begin exploring that possibility, the entire meaning of existence starts to change. Chapter 11. The River of Memory. Imagine waking tomorrow with every memory erased. Your name would remain a sound without meaning. Your home would feel unfamiliar. Your loved ones would appear as strangers. Your achievements would vanish. Your failures would vanish. Even your fears would lose their roots. What would remain? This question appears simple. It is not, because hidden inside it lies one of the greatest mysteries of human existence. What exactly is memory? Most people assume memory is merely a collection of experiences stored inside the brain, like files stored on a computer. Yet the deeper we investigate, the stranger the picture becomes. Memory is not simply something we possess. Memory is something we are. Every decision you make emerges from memory. Every fear carries memory. Every desire carries memory. Every attraction carries memory. Every habit carries memory. Without memory, the person you call I would dissolve like mist beneath the morning sun. Yet there is a deeper mystery. The memories you consciously recall represent only a tiny fraction of what is stored within you. Beneath your ordinary awareness lies a vast hidden archive. An invisible river flowing silently beneath the surface of consciousness. Most people never notice it. Yet it influences nearly every aspect of their lives. A person suddenly fears public speaking but cannot explain why. Another feels anxious near water despite never experiencing danger there. Someone instantly trusts a stranger. Someone else immediately feels resistance. They call these reactions instincts, preferences, personality. But perhaps something more ancient is operating beneath the surface. Perhaps memory extends far beyond what we consciously remember. This possibility fascinated thinkers throughout history, not because they were interested in the past, but because they understood something remarkable. The future grows from hidden memories. A tree grows according to information concealed within a seed. Likewise, a life unfolds according to patterns concealed within consciousness. The future is not created from nothing. It emerges from invisible causes already present. And this is where the investigation becomes truly fascinating. Consider a river. Standing on its bank, you see only the water passing before your eyes. Yet the river's movement depends upon mountains hundreds of miles away. Snowfalls you never witnessed. Streams you never crossed. Valleys you never visited. The visible river is merely the final expression of countless hidden influences. Human life appears to function the same way. The emotions you experience today may have begun years earlier. The choices you make today may originate from forgotten experiences. The person you are becoming may already be quietly forming beneath awareness. Most people live only on the surface of the river. They react to events without understanding the deeper currents moving beneath them. But occasionally something unusual happens. A dream appears. A powerful intuition emerges. A strange feeling arrives without explanation. And suddenly a doorway opens into deeper layers of consciousness. History contains countless stories of individuals who seem to glimpse events before they occurred. Skeptics dismiss these stories. Believers celebrate them. But neither side asks the most important question. How would such a thing even be possible? If the future does not exist in any form, then glimpsing it should be impossible. Yet human experience repeatedly suggests that reality may be more mysterious than our ordinary understanding of time allows. Perhaps time is not as simple as it appears. Perhaps past, present, and future are not separate compartments. Perhaps they are different regions of the same landscape. Imagine standing on a mountain overlooking a winding road. A traveler moving along that road sees only the next bend. But from above, you can see miles ahead. The road already exists. The traveler simply has not reached those sections yet. Could consciousness occasionally rise above its usual position and glimpse portions of the road ahead? This question has fascinated mystics, philosophers, and scientists alike. Not because they wished to escape reality, but because they suspected reality might be larger than it appears. If this is true, then the future is not entirely empty. It exists as possibility, as potential, as direction, as attraction. The future may not merely wait for us. It may be quietly calling us. Think about a flower blooming. Ordinarily we say the past causes the flower. The seed becomes the stem. The stem becomes the bud. The bud becomes the flower. This explanation is correct. But it is incomplete. Because the flower is not only pushed by the past. It is also pulled by its own possibility. Something within the seed longs to become visible. Something within life seeks expression. The future flower exerts a mysterious influence upon the present seed. Not physically. Not mechanically. But as potential. As destiny. As an invitation waiting to be accepted. Human beings experience this phenomenon constantly. A musician hears music before it exists. An inventor senses a creation before it appears. An artist feels a painting before touching the canvas. A seeker senses transformation long before it arrives. The future often whispers before it speaks. Yet few people listen. Most are too busy staring backward. And this creates one of the great tragedies of human life. People become prisoners of old memories. They mistake their history for their identity. They assume yesterday determines tomorrow. They believe their limitations are permanent. Their wounds become definitions. Their failures become conclusions. Their fears become boundaries. Yet life continuously offers another possibility. Because beneath ordinary memory lies something deeper. Potential. Possibility. Unexpressed intelligence. The hidden blueprint of what a person can become. This blueprint is not fixed. It is alive, dynamic, responsive, like a constellation gradually revealing itself as clouds drift away. And this is why understanding memory matters. Not merely because it explains the past, but because it illuminates the future. The more clearly we understand the forces shaping us, the more consciously we can participate in what comes next. Without awareness, the past repeats itself. With awareness, the future begins to open. And this leads us toward another mystery. If memory influences destiny, if hidden patterns shape behavior, if consciousness contains deeper layers than we normally access, then where exactly are these patterns stored? Are they written into the brain? Into the body? Into energy? Into consciousness itself? Or are they part of something even larger? A field of information connecting every life to every other life? The answer to that question may transform everything we believe about identity, freedom, and the nature of human existence. And that is where the next stage of our journey begins. Epilogue. The Sky Within. We have traveled a long way together. We began with stars. We spoke of planets, rhythms, cycles, and invisible forces moving through the vastness of space. We explored ancient observations, forgotten sciences, hidden memories, and the mysterious relationship between the individual and the cosmos. But if this journey has revealed anything, it is this. The real mystery was never the stars. The real mystery was always the observer. The greatest question is not whether distant suns influence our lives. The greatest question is whether we are awake enough to understand our place within the immense web of existence. Throughout this book, one idea has appeared again and again. Nothing exists in isolation. The leaf belongs to the tree. The tree belongs to the forest. The forest belongs to the earth. The earth belongs to the sun. The sun belongs to a galaxy. The galaxy belongs to a universe whose boundaries we still cannot see. And you belong to this same living whole. You are not separate from existence. You are one of its expressions. A wave upon an infinite ocean. A note within a cosmic symphony. A moment through which the universe becomes aware of itself. Most human suffering begins when we forget this. We imagine ourselves isolated. Alone. Disconnected. We fight against the currents that carry us. We cling to temporary forms and fear their disappearance. We build identities around names, possessions, achievements, and beliefs. Then life changes, as it always does. And we suffer because we mistook passing forms for permanent realities. Yet the deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes. Everything moves. Everything changes. Everything participates in a greater unfolding. The stars move. The seasons move. The oceans move. The body moves. Thoughts move. Civilizations move. Even galaxies move. Movement is not an exception. Movement is the nature of existence itself. To resist this truth is to create conflict. To understand it is to discover harmony. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson hidden within all genuine wisdom traditions. Not prediction. Not control. Not certainty. But participation. The wise person does not seek to dominate the river. The wise person learns how to flow with it. The wise person recognizes that life is not happening against them. Life is happening through them. And when this understanding begins to dawn, something remarkable occurs. Fear starts to loosen its grip. The future no longer appears as an enemy. Change no longer feels like destruction. Uncertainty becomes possibility. The unknown becomes invitation. You begin to trust the intelligence that moves through existence. Not blindly. Not passively. But consciously. You realize that while you cannot control every event, you can transform your relationship with every event. You may not choose every circumstance. But you can choose awareness. You can choose understanding. You can choose presence. And in that choice, freedom begins. Perhaps the stars influence us. Perhaps they do not influence us in the ways ancient people imagined. Perhaps future discoveries will reveal connections we cannot yet comprehend. Perhaps many mysteries still wait beyond the horizon of current knowledge. But regardless of what science discovers tomorrow, one truth remains unchanged. Your life is not separate from the life of the cosmos. The same forces that shape galaxies shape cells. The same intelligence that guides seasons guides growth. The same mystery that shines through distant stars shines through your own consciousness. You are not merely looking at the universe. The universe is looking at itself through you. And so, as these pages come to an end, the journey does not truly end. It returns to where it began. To this moment. To this breath. To this awareness. Look up at the night sky. Notice the stars. Notice their silence. Notice their beauty. Then close your eyes. And notice something even more mysterious. The vastness within. For the greatest constellation you will ever explore is not above your head. It is within your own being. And the journey toward understanding it has only just begun.